Hello friends, welcome to our channel History Chronicles. The summer of 1789 was a time of profound change in France, with revolution stirring in the hearts of the people. In the cities, especially in Paris, the air was thick with anticipation as the National Assembly debated the future of the nation. But far from the bustling urban centers, in the quiet countryside, a different kind of unrest was taking root. This was not the intellectual fervor of political debate or the organized protests of the urban masses. It was something more primal, more visceral, a wave of panic and fear that would sweep through rural France and come to be known as the Great Fear. In the rural villages and towns of France, the common people, the peasants, had long endured the harsh realities of life under the Ancien regime. They were burdened by heavy taxes, subjected to feudal obligations, and often at the mercy of local lords who held significant power over their lives. While the revolution in Paris was unfolding, the peasants were beginning to hear rumors that would ignite a wildfire of fear and suspicion. The summer of 1789 was marked by a severe economic crisis that had left many peasants struggling to survive. The harvests had been poor, food was scarce, and prices were rising. As these hardships grew, so did the anger and frustration among the rural population. But what truly set the stage for the Great Fear were the whispers of conspiracy, of an impending counter-revolution led by the aristocracy. It was said that the nobles, threatened by the revolutionary changes in Paris, were plotting to suppress the uprising by force. They would, so the rumors went, unleash bands of brigands to pillage the countryside, destroy the harvest, and starve the people into submission. These rumors spread like wildfire. In village after village, fear took hold. The peasants, already on edge due to their dire circumstances, were quick to believe that an attack was imminent. The stories varied from place to place. Sometimes the brigands were said to be foreign mercenaries. Other times they were described as criminals released from the jails by the nobility. But the common thread in all these tales was the belief that the nobility was behind it all, seeking to reassert their control over the country. The Great Fear was not just a product of rumor. It was also fueled by a deep-seated mistrust of the aristocracy. For centuries, the peasants had lived under the thumb of the feudal lords, who extracted labor and taxes from them with little regard for their well-being. Now, with the revolution shaking the foundations of the old order, the peasants were ready to rise up against their oppressors. The fear of an attack by brigands became a catalyst for action. Across France, the response to the Great Fear was swift and at times violent. In many areas, the peasants took matters into their own hands. They formed militias, armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find, and began to patrol the countryside, looking for signs of the rumored brigands. But as the days passed and no such brigands appeared, the focus of their anger began to shift. If the nobles were behind the brigands, then perhaps it was the nobles themselves who needed to be dealt with. What followed was a wave of attacks on the symbols of feudal power. Peasants stormed the manor houses of the nobility, ransacking them and destroying records of feudal dues and obligations. These records, known as terriers, were a constant reminder of the peasants' subjugation, listing the taxes and services they were required to provide to their lords. By destroying these documents, the peasants were symbolically and literally freeing themselves from the bonds of feudalism. In some cases, the violence went further. There were reports of noblemen being attacked or even killed, though these incidents were relatively rare. For the most part, the Great Fear was marked by the destruction of property rather than the loss of life. Nevertheless, the message was clear. The old order was being swept away, and the peasants would no longer tolerate the injustices they had endured for so long. The National Assembly in Paris, alarmed by the spread of the Great Fear, recognized that it needed to address the grievances of the peasants before the situation spiraled out of control. On August 4th, 1789, in a dramatic session, the Assembly voted to abolish the feudal system entirely. The decrees of August 4th marked the end of feudal privileges, including the seigneurial rights of the nobility, the tithe owed to the church, and other forms of peasant obligations. It was a monumental shift, as centuries of tradition were swept away in a single night. The Great Fear, though rooted in rumor and paranoia, had a profound impact on the course of the French Revolution. It demonstrated the power of the peasantry and their willingness to take radical action to defend their rights. It also highlighted the deep divisions between the rural population and the aristocracy, divisions that would continue to shape the revolution in the years to come. But beyond the immediate consequences, the Great Fear revealed something deeper about the nature of the revolution. It showed that the revolution was not just a political movement led by the educated elite in Paris. It was also a social and economic upheaval that touched every corner of France. The peasants, who had long been the most oppressed and marginalized group in French society, were now asserting their place in the new order. As we reflect on the events of the Great Fear, it's important to recognize the complex emotions that drove the peasants to act as they did. They were motivated by fear, yes, but also by a desire for justice and a better life. The destruction of the manorial records was not just an act of vandalism. It was a declaration of freedom, a rejection of a system that had kept them in chains for generations. The Great Fear may have been born out of rumor and panic, but its legacy is one of empowerment. The peasants of France, once thought to be passive and submissive, had shown that they were capable of shaping their own destiny. They had taken the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity to heart, and they would fight to see them realized. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most tumultuous periods of French history. The Great Fear was a moment of profound transformation, not just for the peasants who lived through it, but for the nation as a whole. As we continue to explore the events of the French Revolution, we'll see how this fear gave way to hope, and how the people of France worked to build a new society on the ashes of the old. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring with History Chronicles.